We have been recently looking at Solomon and his writings. And last week, Mike did a wonderful job of teaching on Proverbs, but he just kind of scratched the surface. So I'd like to go into Proverbs once again. You can turn to Proverbs. And tonight we're going to be doing some more sort of different selected Proverbs. But first, I want to give you a quick overview of Proverbs as a book. And when I say quick, I mean quick in that I'm going to talk really fast to try to cover this information and still be able to have time to dig into Proverbs itself. The overarching structure of Proverbs. The first 9 chapters are presented or written in a narrative style. A narrative, like telling a story. And then chapters 10 to 29 are written in comparing and contrasting couplets, primarily dealing with 3 topics. The righteous or just man, and compared to the wicked or evil man. The wise man and the foolish man. The diligent man and the slothful or lazy man. So those 3 topics of righteousness, diligence, or faithfulness, and wisdom, those are handled through the majority of Proverbs. And it's done in that couplets, where first it'll talk about the one, and then it'll talk about the other. Those are opposing couplets. Sometimes it'll just be repeating couplets, talking about the righteous man in a couple of different ways. And then the last 2 chapters of Proverbs, again, return to a narrative form. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1 to verse 9 introduce the writer and the purpose of the book, and we'll look at that in just a minute here. And then beginning in verse 20 of chapter 1, all the way to the end of chapter 9, in that section that is a long narrative, it speaks about wisdom, and wisdom is personified as a woman. Doing so to show how desirable and how rewarding wisdom is. Now, I'd also ask the ladies, when you're reading Proverbs, to remember that wisdom is coming from the mouth of a woman, showing how desired it would be. When you read later on in Proverbs, a couple of Proverbs, that it may not present women in quite as favorable a light. And also, when you get to the end of Proverbs, the last chapter of Proverbs deals with the virtuous woman. And that's a wonderful section that we won't get into this evening, because I'm going to have Grace teach that in a couple of weeks and really handle that and break it down. That section where wisdom is personified as a woman, that whole section still has what's referred to as parallelisms, where it will contrast wisdom as a woman to the foreign woman or foolish woman. And the foreign woman isn't talking really about a woman so much from another country. That's not the purpose of it, as much as that woman that would be not wise. That woman who would be foreign, and even into a woman that it talks about her being a woman that is adulterous. But here again, it's not really talking about the actual act of adultery, but using that in the sense of comparing it to idolatry. And that's an analogy that's used often with idolatry, that of adultery, being unfaithful to God. And that's what's really spoken of when you're reading those sections. Yes, it would be the same truths would hold for the actual adultery, the actual act of adultery. But when you're reading those, bear in mind that the greater meaning, the greater point of it is talking about idolatry. And when it's talking about a foreign woman, it's because those women around them, the nations around them, were all idolatrous nations. So let's go then to chapter 1, and we'll read a little bit of this introductory section, beginning in verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Here again, it's identified right in the beginning that Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, is the writer. To know wisdom and instruction, here's the purpose. To perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equity. To give subtlety in the sense of wisdom, to the simple. And here simple is in the sense of the foolish, or simple-minded is kind of a phrase that is used in that same sense. To the young man, knowledge and discretion. So the book is especially written to the young man. And it's to give him wisdom in life. And it gives such great wisdom, and it's high, we can all stand to learn from it, to learn wisdom, but especially to the young, you have such great practical truths that are addressed here. And the first of those, the first great truth that's laid down, the foundation of all, is in the next verse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear of the Lord, the respect for the Lord, the recognition that God knows more than we do is the beginning of knowledge. To recognize that God is the source of life, that is the beginning of all knowledge. And the beginning in the sense of it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Verse 8. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. I love that in giving this wisdom to the young man, it shows that it's both from the perspective of the father and mother giving this wisdom to him. For that wisdom shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck. We'll skip down to, we're going to skip a long way down. We're going to go to chapter 12. And I'll leave you to read sometime that whole section of wisdom where it's personified as a woman. But in there it talks about how wisdom is to be valued above all precious gems. That it's more worthy, it's more precious than rubies, which were considered more precious than diamonds in that day, or anything else that you could ever want. That wisdom was to be valued above everything else. But we're going to jump into chapter 12, and I'm just going to read to you really some of my favorite Proverbs, but also I think ones that are a great blessing to everybody. And this is just kind of like a teaser trailer of Proverbs, or like when you go on Amazon and you have those books where it says look inside, and you can look at a page here or a page there, and it's just to get you interested enough to buy the book. Well, that's the goal here. That I'm going to just be covering enough of Proverbs so that it entices you to seek after that wisdom yourself more. To go into Proverbs more and to read it and to just see the great truths and treasures that are laid in it. In chapter 12 and verse 25, it says, heaviness in the heart of man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad. Heaviness in the heart of man makes the heart stoop. And boy, when someone's heavy, sometimes even their physical posture takes on that it stoops, that it weighs us down. And that heaviness can come from a lot of things in life. Life is hard. Life is hard. And the world can really beat you up, and it can really break your heart. And if you let it, it can cause you to just be bowed down throughout life. But we don't have to do that, because it says a good word maketh it glad. Where do we find those good words? In God's Word. God's Word is filled with good words. These are some of them. But these good words to hold in our hearts and to think about and to meditate on that, and that makes the heart glad. Look at chapter 14 of Proverbs. Here's one of those ones I was warning you about. In verse 1, every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with their hands. So here you have those couplets, contrasting here a wise woman with a foolish woman. And it says a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish one tears it down. Now, stop and think about this. Do you think that the intent of the woman was to just tear down her house? I don't think so. But the wise woman, she recognizes that there's certain things that she does that are going to build her house. And of course, the house, she's not in the construction business here. Mm-hmm. It's talking about her family. It's talking about building up that family and making a sweet home. And a wise woman thinks about how to do that. But a foolish woman, she allows her actions to just tear it down. Whether it's a woman or a man, we have to recognize that the things we do in life will do one or the other. Look at verse 4. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox. You know, in one place, one of the Proverbs, it talks about, well, it's actually not in Proverbs, in Psalms. The word proverb is also translated parable in places. And in the Old Testament, it talks about a parable and the dark sayings. And the word parable is Proverbs, but the dark sayings is one of the ways the Proverbs is sometimes described. And it's not dark in the sense of evil or even heaviness. It's dark in the sense of not immediately clear. And that's the design of a proverb. It makes you think. It invites you to meditate on it, to think about, what does this mean? Now, this business of the oxen, the crib is clean, he's not stating the obvious agricultural truth there, that where there's no oxen, the crib's clean, but much increases by the strength of the ox. In life, when you're dealing with people, you know what? People in your life add a lot to it. And they can help you. And whether you're talking about a team effort of doing something or working with people, or you're talking about just people and relationships in your life. When you deal with people, you know what you're going to deal with? You're going to have a crib that's not real clean sometimes. You're going to have to shovel some manure sometimes when you're dealing with people. You're going to have to put up with some manure. So tempted to tell my Harry Truman story, but I won't. You're going to deal with it. You're going to deal with some of that stuff. And yet, remember that, when you don't have people helping, when you don't have people in your life, you don't have to deal with that stuff, but they add a lot to your life. Look at verse 7. Go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. There again, that's one to think about. When you come across somebody that you recognize, they don't know what they're talking about, or they're just being foolish, it doesn't say stop and debate them. It doesn't say argue with them. It doesn't say get in a war with them or let them get you all upset. It just says leave. Just leave. If you recognize that the guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or this is just foolishness, don't waste your time with it. Don't let it get under your skin. Look at verse 12. There's a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. There's a lot of proverbs that express either that exact same truth or very similar truths. It says that every man's way seems right in his own eyes. It says the Lord's the one that weighs the heart, weighs the spirits. You know, everybody thinks that they're right. And everybody thinks that what they're doing is right, or for the most part, they wouldn't be doing it, no matter how wrong it is. They've got their own They've got a different code they're living by. Al Capone famously said, I don't understand why everybody's against me. All I've ever tried to do is help people. And not only is that like seemingly, Al Capone was the first one to ever start a soup kitchen. Mm-hmm. So in his book, that was a true statement. He wasn't being disingenuous. Everybody's right in their own eyes, but the Lord's the one that decides. And not only that, but a lot of them, like Al found out, where it ends up in is death. Look at verse 15. The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. The simple believe every word. And boy, you can't go through life doing that no matter how convinced the person telling you is of what they're telling you. Or how convinced everybody else is that that person is right. The wise man takes a deeper look. He takes a deeper look. And boy, whatever you're being told, you need to take a good deep look at whether it's right or wrong. Well, we'll jump over to chapter 15. Here's one of my favorites. Verse 1. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. If you ever come across, not that this would never happen, but if you ever come across somebody that is angry, the best way to deal with it, it says, is a soft answer. A soft answer turns away wrath. But that's not usually what you want to do when somebody's yelling at you, is it? You don't usually want to just figure out how to diffuse it. You want to yell back. You want to give them, both barrels. And yet it's a soft answer that turns away that wrath, and the other stuff just keeps it going. Look at verse 10. Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. Proverbs talks a lot about reproof, and every one of these truths that I'm reading to you, that they're themes, most of them, that are repeated over and over again. And the rejection of reproof is one that's repeatedly talked about. Nobody likes reproof. Most people, hardly anybody does. If somebody does it really gently, you might handle it. I had a job for years, 10 years, where I worked as an inspector, quality control. And in that job, that's all you do is basically, for the most part, reprove people. The guy works real hard making a part, he brings it in, you take a look at it, and you have to go out and tell him that it's wrong. And I enjoy the job, not because I enjoyed there's a lot of reasons I enjoyed the job. I didn't enjoy telling people they were wrong, but the fact that I didn't enjoy that made it easy for them to receive it. A lot of guys that did that job, they liked telling people that they were wrong, made them feel superior. But I recognized that in life, that these guys, these were tool and die people, men that had to spend years, developing these skills, and they wanted to do the best. And the fact that I recognize that, and I try to make it as easy to receive that news as possible, they never had a problem with me. That's the heart when you're giving reproof, is that you do look to see how you can best give it so that it will best be received. And no matter how hard we try in life to be right, recognize there's times where we're going to miss the mark, and we need to have that pointed out. Look at verse 13. A merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart the spirit is broken. A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance. So, get a merry heart. Get a merry heart. Look at 16. Better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. You're better off having a little and have the respect for God in your life, than a lot and all the trouble that goes with it. Verse 17. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. You can have a stalled ox, have steak on the table every night, and that's not as good as some simple little meal where there's love. It's the love that makes the meal or makes life worth living. Look at verse 22. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. In the multitude of counselors, wise counsel, not the multitude of a foolish counsel, not somebody going on Facebook and just letting every fool weigh in on what they ought to do with their life. That's not necessarily any value. But in counselors that know the truth, that know the Word of God, in that there is value. Let's go to chapter 16. Verse 7. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Isn't that great? When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Verse 9. A man's heart devises his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Well, that's one of my favorites. A man devises his way. He decides which way he wants to go. God doesn't say, Mike, you're going to be a painter whether you like it or not. And Amanda, you're going to work at Marabou for the rest of your life whether you like it or not. And Dylan, you're going to whatever you do. You decide what you want to do in life. You decide if you want to be a butcher, baker, candlestick maker. You decide if you want to live in New York or Oregon, or somebody was picking on Oregon today, and that's why it came to my mind. Wherever the place might be. You decide these things, but the Lord directs your steps. In other words, in the greater way of life, what do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? God doesn't tell you got to do this or that. He'll work in you. But whatever you want to do, it's the Lord that can direct your steps of how to get there. People so often have great dreams, but not a clue of how to get to those dreams, how to fulfill them. But God knows, and He can help and will. Look at verse 32. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. And a lot of times for a lot of people, that seems like a lot harder task to do, to control their anger, than to conquer a city. But he that can do it is much mightier. Look at Proverbs 17, verse 22. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. They've proven that medically. They've proven it in every way they can. That a merry heart does good like a medicine. I remember a guy, when I was a kid, a news artist show, one of these features, talking about some fella that was supposed to die, and rather than be treated in the hospital, he just got a hospital bed, put it in a hotel room, and watched candid camera. He thought that was funny. Like nonstop. Just watched candid camera. And he got healed just from watching Alan Funt stick a camera in people's faces in different situations. He found it hilarious. Whatever the case may be, to lighten the heart, it's like a medicine. It does good like a medicine. Look at verse 28. Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. Another way of saying that first part, that even a fool, when he, holdeth his peace, is counted wise. Somebody once expressed it as, it's better to be thought a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. It's another way of saying what that's saying. I like the one I heard from my high school teacher, who said, people that think by the inch and speak by the yard should be moved by the foot. Let's go to chapter 18. A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself.
Wow. What verse was that?
2. Yeah, Proverbs 18:2. Verse 13. He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. were talking about that one recently at a heart sharing fellowship. Verse 16. A man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him before great men. Verse 19. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. Once you offend somebody, it's pretty hard to win them back. Look at verse 24. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. You know, so many of these truths, when it sounds like, well, yeah, that's obvious, but stop and think about that, You want friends? Well, then be friendly to people. Go out and make friends. Do it. And there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Boy, when you've got that kind of friend that you can count on, that no matter what, boy, that's really to be valued. Mm-hmm. Look at Proverbs 19, verse 21. There are many devices in a man's heart, nevertheless, the counsel of the Lord, that shall stand. Lots of things flip through your head, but the thing you can really trust is the counsel of the Lord. Proverbs 20, verse 4. Now we get into a different one of these categories, the lazy guy. The sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold. Therefore shall he beg and harvest and have nothing. On those early spring days, you say, it's really cold out there today. I'm not going to do it yet. It's too cold. I'll wait. It's still cold tomorrow. I'll wait. And then, but when it comes harvest time, he's got nothing to harvest and he's going to starve. Proverbs 21, verse 31. The horse is prepared against the day of battle. The horse, that represents all the strength of a kingdom, all the tanks, the military, all of that. But safety is of the Lord. That's where you've got to put your real trust always, the Lord. Look at Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Verse 15. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Now, you got to understand what that rod of correction really means, and I won't even attempt to go into it tonight, but anybody that wants to know more about it, we actually have, Loretta and I did a class on it called Raising Children God's Way, and it's available on Eternally Blessed. Look at Proverbs 24, verse 10. If thou faint in the day of adversity, thy strength is small. We're all going to come across those days of adversity. And if we do faint, if we do quit, then your strength's small. You got to challenge yourself. You got to challenge yourself to rise up, to be tougher, to not give in, to not quit. And there will be those days of adversity where you want to. And that's, anybody that's lived life and faced any adversity understands how easy that can be. But you know what? For the believer, for those born again, you don't have to rely on your own strength. I can do all things through Christ that does what? Strengthens me. That's what you tap into. When you get to the end of your own strength, you tap into that. You tap into, I can do all things through Christ, and that gives you the strength to keep fighting. Here's another good one in that same line, in that same chapter, in verse 16. For a just man falleth 7 times and rise up again, but the wicked shall fall into mischief. 7 times, and again, just like that, forgiven 7 times business. It's not literal. It means it's the number of perfection. You just keep on getting up. It doesn't matter how many times you knock down. Oh, there's so many great ones, and we won't have time for most of these here for the rest of it. I guess I'll just close out. Maybe we'll do more of these some other time. But I do encourage you to dig into them. You'll enjoy them. I always enjoy Proverbs. They're fun, they're funny, they're sweet, and they are so instructional.